Hi, everyone, and welcome to the I Am Landscape Growth Podcast, where entrepreneurs help entrepreneurs grow faster, better, and stronger in the green industry. From leadership to sales to recruiting and operational excellence, we cover the topics holding entrepreneurs back and share how to get past those bottlenecks with the best in the industry. I'm your host, Rob Murray, co founder and CEO of Intrigue, a digital marketing company focused on helping landscape companies grow. So sit back and enjoy the show. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the I Am Landscape Growth Podcast. Today, I have the privilege of introducing our guest, Matt Crinklaw from Greenius, now with LMN. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show and doing this.
Yeah, no problem. I'm really happy to be here.
You had quite the journey the last couple of years. I know you've been growing Greenius as a co-founder for the better part of 2 decades, and then acquired by LMN in the last couple of years. Massive focus on training and development within the green industry, but maybe you can just give the audience a little bit of context, kind of how did this whole thing started, where you've come from, and kind of what you're up to today in a, Cole's Notes summary fashion.
Yeah, for sure. So we started probably 17 years ago, and it was kind of the idea. There was a large landscape company. I think they have around 120 employees, and they kind of needed a training program. So I'm from the tech world side of things. So they reached out to me and said, "Hey, we need this training program." So I said, "You got to do A, B, and C." And then they said, "Well, why don't you come work with us and let's build this together?" So I did the tech side, and then the landscapers did the expertise and all the equipment side of things. And together we built the Greenius platform. And I got to say, we were way ahead of our time, because thinking back about 17 years ago, streaming video really wasn't a thing. It's not what it was today. So really what we had to do was take the video, break it down into like a series of JPEGs, and like the user thought they were watching a video, but really it was just a JPEG slideshow. It
That's
was,
great. A true frame rate, like going
yeah,
back old school. That's so great.
yeah. And then so we launch, and then we thought, okay, we got $1 million idea here. Like, how are we going to line up all these sales? And yeah, it was a grind. Like, it was a grind. Landscapers weren't ready for technology. How could you train somebody online to use a mower in the field, right? Like, the mindset we had to battle. So once we got the mindset conquered, and the technology conquered, we started winning. And it was a grind, and it's still a grind, but we're very proud of it.
Yeah, so you're like the 15-year overnight success or something to that effect.
Absolutely. I can tell you 50 ways how not to film a training course, or how not to do it, and how to waste money trying to figure it out. So it was quite the learning process. And I mean, it got us to where we are today. So we're extremely grateful for the process. It was just an awesome experience.
Very cool. And so what is your primary focus now? What are you up to today?
So now we're all about helping landscapers solve the labor problem in the industry. So, how can you, like, I know since COVID, we've all heard the term the great resignation, right? But it's more than that. It's been more the great repurposing. So people have really readjusted their priorities. So there's not really a labor problem. It's more of a repurposing problem. So the people are out there, right? So you gotta meet the skills development, the work-life balance, and just kind of fill the needs of what people are looking for. And you can solve this problem. So Greenius really helps by onboarding people. So if you look at the landscape industry as a whole, turnover is a big problem. It's one of the largest compared to any other industry. And it comes down to employee experience. So whenever I hear the word culture, like we always hear this talk about, hey, you got to have good company culture, or you have bad company culture. But whenever I hear that, I challenge people to say, okay, take the word culture and swap it out with employee experience, and it starts making a lot more sense. So you either have good employee experiences, or you have
Right, right.
bad employee experiences. And what we do starting from the very beginning is a solid onboarding program built around good employee experiences. So show them the ropes, show them what their first day would look like, how to use the equipment, how to fuel the equipment. And they're going to really feel comfortable in their new role and have this great experience, and not be constantly getting in trouble for doing the wrong thing. So anything you can do to really build a solid onboarding experience is just a huge win. And that's where we come in. So we can execute a full 90-day onboarding program. And it's only going to take, I would say, 2 to 3 hours of the crew leader's time in that 90 days, because we're doing all the online training with all our videos. And then they got to do the quiz at the end of those videos to verify they learned the skill. But then we're the first to acknowledge you just can't watch a training video, be an expert on landscape equipment. You got to
No.
use the equipment. So we have a field app where they have kind of these field checklists where they actually have to demonstrate the knowledge of the equipment. And where that really helps is kind of that standardized messaging. So all crew leaders are delivering the same training all the same way. And I like to use the analogy of McDonald's. Like, you go to any McDonald's and the food tastes the same because everyone's following the same process. So how do you apply that as a landscape company and get all your crew leaders training on the same process? And that's where our field checklists come in. So they're all training the exact same thing.
So then, okay, we're going to get into this deeper for sure. If we
Yeah,
just pull back for a minute though, and we talk about this idea around people see the great resignation or the great repurposing, and then there's this perception that there's not enough people out there to recruit, or it's very difficult to do. And even if we do get them, they might not have the best employee experience. They end up walking out the door, and we're like kind of leaking out the back. What do you see as the primary growth constraint? That's the theme of the entire podcast. And if we look at what you're talking about right now with regard to recruitment, employee experience, onboarding, skill development, career paths, promotions, all around people. But what do you see, like Matt, as somebody working with dozens, if not hundreds, of landscapers, being at these conferences, hearing everybody talk about what's going on in the market? What's the primary growth constraint from your perspective for entrepreneurs in the green industry today?
for sure. I think the number one problem is people. So if you want to grow by 20% next year, like, their first thought is, where am I going to get the staff to do that? Right? How am I going to? And I think it's a fair statement that a lot of contractors have the sales to grow by 20% next year if they really wanted to. It's the people problem that I think is a big constraint. So the question is, how do you get the people you need so you can forecast and grow, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there's two parts to that. One is building an employee funnel. So, and I've been coaching our contractors on this, is like, we all know what our sales funnels are, right? So you have like your lead sources, your social media, your referrals, your sales team, all these
Your
people
email
thrown.
list
Yeah, your
to your
email
prospects and your
lists.
current customers, but for some reason we don't want to do that when it comes to recruitment.
Exactly. So I challenge our contractors, take all your mindset you have around lead funnels and apply it to hiring funnels. So okay, if we need to hire 10 people, we need this many people into the funnel. So how do we get them into the funnel? So you got to solve that problem through job boards, Indeed, LinkedIn, social media posts. Like, make sure all these are kind of streamlined and built around recruiting people. And then from there, you got to pre-qualify them with like the same as your sales funnel. So you might have a 5 survey question. Are you willing to learn new skills to work in the landscape industry? That could be one of them. Then from there, you get to your hiring state. And we're at a state where it's a job seeker's market. So it's almost like you got to use your sales hat. If you have all these people you want to work at your company, you got to sell them on your company. So all your recruiting pages got to reflect that. Possibly short videos from current employees talking about how the company supports them, how it's a great place to work. It supports
Being a
their.
great place to work needs to be part of the whole thing. So as a leader, we got to look in the mirror and say, what are we doing to make this a great place to work?
Absolutely. And tell everybody about that. So once you convert them, then you got to try to keep them. And then, so how do you nurture them, right? So you nurture your current customers to get repeat business and possibly enhancements and grow off the revenue of current customers. Well, you got to do the same thing with your employees. How do you turn them into referrals, into selling your company as well?
Advocates, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I like to say, like, What would your employees say to their family members around Thanksgiving dinner? If they said, "Hey, what's it like to work at your company?" or "How's work going?" What are they saying about you? And that's what they're saying to everybody. So you want to make sure that that's a good story they're telling.
Cool. So then and that really shifts back to what you were saying before, right? About this employee experience component. And before we started recording, we talked a little bit about how all the most successful entrepreneurs I interview, actually, regardless of industry, but definitively part of the green industry, focus on training and development as like a priority. And some of them even admit that they're not even landscape companies; they're actually training companies. They just happen to do landscaping. The ones that are like really, really good. Um, so outside of the platform, obviously that being a huge tool to help people build training programs, because there's a lot of stuff that's necessarily unique to them that you can grab from I'm assuming the library that exists on the platform. But what do you see as opportunities for onboarding and skill development, and what can companies do to help create that great employee experience so that people, when they do come through and you've done all the work to get somebody through your recruiting funnels, that they want to stay?
Yeah, for sure. I'll start at the very beginning of the process. So, in your job ad, you kind of want to talk about, well, you do want to talk about that your career focused company, not just a job. So, hey, we want you to be successful. We want you to grow and we want you to have a career with our company. And that's really attractive to prospective candidates because the myth we're battling in the landscape industry that it's a dead end manual labor job.
Right.
And when that's far from the case, there's so much opportunity in the landscape industry. And it's just that we got to convey that. So you think about a snow shoveler, it's a very high turnover position. And this time of year, a lot of people are trying to recruit shovelers. And you look at a snow shoveler ad, and this is a traditional snow shoveler ad I pulled that's out and live right now. It just basically says, hey, they're responsible for the safe and productive removal of snow and ice from residential commercial job sites. Walkways and traffic areas must be willing to be on call, work nights as needed, etc. Doesn't sound very exciting, right?
Very inspiring. Yeah, yeah.
Well, with a few minor tweaks and leveraging the fact that you're a growth minded company and we have a training program, and I'll talk about how to structure that a bit. But if you put that in your job ad, now listen to this version of a snow shoveler job ad. Get ready for an awesome career journey with us. Our snow shovelers are more than just snow experts, are destined for greatness. Picture this: as winter ends, our top shovelers get special training and promoted to our maintenance teams in the spring. But that's not all. We love celebrating success. Brace yourself for a pay raise in your new maintenance role. Once on our maintenance team, you learn new skills and knowledge to continue moving forward. We're not just offering a job, we're paving the way to success. You could be a crew leader or higher in the future. Your career adventure awaits. Let's shovel our way to success together.
Yeah, that's cool.
Right?
And it's not crazy. Like, you're not, having to put miraculous copy together. It's just tweaking kind of what you said at the very beginning, right?
Yeah, you're just leveraging the fact that, and the old analogy, chop wood, carry water, right? Do the work now for comfort and success in the future. And a snow shoveler is a hard to recruit position, but use it as leverage to say, hey, just get your foot in the door. Get this job done. You'll be on our maintenance crew. From there, we'll train you to a crew leader. From there, you could be a branch manager. And companies that post these career paths, like take your career path and post it in the break room and show, here's how you go from shoveler to branch manager and everything you have to do in between. They're seeing drastic reduction in turnover because employee progress is clearly laid out on how to get from step A to B and C. They know exactly where they're at in that process, and they know the next promotion is just around the corner. So
Yeah, it's so cool. I mean, I reference a third-year university course, but organizational behavior two, talk about expectancy theory. One of the best ways to engage somebody within your workforce is to help them see clearly what can be expected of them in the future. And I think you've outlined that pretty specifically. So if I'm there, let's just say I'm an entrepreneur right now, and I don't have that career path set out right now. Maybe I'm a bit smaller. Maybe we don't have room for a bunch of branch managers. Maybe we're a $10 million company. We've got one or two branches, and I started talking about how they're going to be the next branch manager, and the branch manager's like, well, what am I going to do? So it's just not quite there yet. I haven't done any of this yet. What's the first way of starting to build out these career paths so that people can start to promote them?
Yeah, so I'll use my example I started with. Okay, we're at a snow shoveler. Okay, so to move to our maintenance crew in the spring, we expect these things from you. So we want you to complete your maintenance level one training. Which might include the small equipment, engines and fuel basics, which is how to operate the equipment, fuel the equipment. Maybe we'll lay out some key skills you need to start on our maintenance crew, but also tag some items that are valuable to you as a company owner. So, okay, to get promoted in this role, you got to show up 99% of the time. And you also got to show up 100% ready to work. So, no ghosting us, right? Showing up is a key thing here. So, you got to show up. And when you do show up, you got to be ready to work. So, you got to be dressed properly. You got to have all your PPE. And then maybe you might tag some time requirements around it, like, you got to have 200 hours on a shoveler crew before you can move on to a maintenance role. So set up this criteria, check boxes that everyone meets. Hey, if you get all this done, then we'll bump you up to our maintenance crew in the spring. And then from there, you set them on maintenance level two. So in the spring, they might start as a maintenance level one. So they're going to be on the basic equipment, garden beds. But you can start them on their maintenance level two training, which is the larger equipment. Any additional skills, you're on time. Again, you're showing up 100% ready to work. But here's the opportunity to start building your funnel where if you know you want to grow your design build division next year by 20%, you want to do more installs and more construction jobs, and you know you're going to need staff, and you have an employee that might want to go that route, well, you could start them on the design and build pathway now, and they can start learning how to use the equipment, how to read the blueprints, everything required of them for next year. So then when that division grows, you have people in that funnel that have been training all year and can go right into that role.
And
So
you're
it's a
upskilling them before you quite, necessarily need them. And so does Greenius have all this training baked into the platforms? So you can put them onto these different paths and I don't have to go build it myself?
yeah. So we have all these paths set up, and we're actually launching a full training pass apprenticeship program, hopefully at the end of Q1, early Q2, that we're really trying to support the whole apprenticeship mindset, because that's companies that are rolling out apprenticeships are really seeing a lot of employees returning year after year. They're seeing better workers, better skills. And I'm using the analogy a lot like baseball. I'm a huge baseball fan, and they have the farm system and the professional leagues. And a lot of successful teams build their farm players up to that level so they don't have to go out and pay millions of dollars. They grow them from within. And that's kind of what landscape companies can do is start growing the employees they need. So they know their next year's plans. And if they can grow the employees they need, then they're going to be one step ahead of the game.
Yeah, it's huge. And like very few people are doing it, well, let alone doing it well. So one of the things you mentioned is this idea of micro promotions. Can you just
Yeah.
speak to that and help people understand what does that mean?
Yeah. So there's a book I read and I highly recommend it to everyone. It's called Fire Your Hiring Habits. And it's all about a post COVID world about hiring, and it covers every industry. And the writer of the book was from a VP from a major electronics manufacturing company, and they have plants all over the world. But they have, and their average turnover is 30 to 40%, which is again very similar to what we're seeing in the landscape industry. But they had one plant where their turnover was less than 10%. So they were shocked. Well, why, like same plant, same modern facility, same processes, but why is their turnover 30% better than everyone else's? So we gotta figure this out. So they went there and they discovered two things. One, that they clearly had the employee progress mapped out. So how do you go from an entry level position to management? And they had this all on the wall, every step and everything you had to do. But what they did differently was they offered micro promotions, and how you can apply to the landscape industry. If you think about the career ladder, the rungs of the career ladder, how do you shorten those rungs? And I use this analogy for simple math only. Your wages are your wages. But if you're paying a year one employee $15 an hour, and then as soon as they hit a year two employee, you're going to pay them $19 an hour, right? Well, if you can take that $4 an hour raise and break it down and every 3 months give $1 an hour raise, make it kind of a micro promotion. So over the next 3 months, you got to do this many training courses in Greenius. Again, you got to show up. You can't be late. You got to have your PPE. You got to learn this skill. And then if you get all this done at the 3 month mark, we'll give you $1 an hour raise. And then you repeat that in the next block, another $1 an hour. By the end of the year, they're at that $19 an hour raise that you were going to give them anyways. But what you've done is created a retention tool. So now the employee knows they're always at that next pay raise or that always next level. That micro promotion is just around the corner. So they're not going to leave and go somewhere else because they know they're that close to that next step. So it becomes this huge retention tool because they know they're moving forward and they're not going to leave and start over somewhere else.
Yeah, that's super cool. And then it also is that, like, progression is addictive too, right? Like, I'm seeing the impact of my hard work quicker. I'm not waiting until the end of the year to have to do something about it. Let's say you have a staff of 50, 60 folks on a first year basis, maybe 30 people on the first year basis. Is there any hints or tips on how to administrate something like that? Make it simple? Any tools that you guys know of that you might want to recommend, or just give somebody an idea of how they want to go about it?
Yeah, definitely thinking here. Like the most important thing is documenting it and making it clear, like very much like streetlights on a dark night, right? Like they should be laying out clearly the next step and clearly the goals and everything that needs to be accomplished. And it should be very well documented, very crystal clear, and very easy to achieve. And also be giving people the opportunity to learn these skills as well is very important. You just can't have the program and say this is what happens. You also need to give the opportunities to learn those skills. So if you got to move from one level to the next level and there's a key skill you have to learn to get there, well, then maybe every Saturday you should be hosting skills clinics for your company where, okay, every Saturday come in for an hour and we're going to learn a new skill this Saturday. There's breakfast, there's coffee, and each week will be a different skill. Make it optional. Like you don't have to make it mandatory,
Yeah, no,
but
that's cool, but provide the opportunity and the platform to do it.
provide the opportunity. So each week, and if you think about yourself as a manager and you're constantly putting out fires, think about the top 5 fires you're always putting out. And then there's your first 5 topics for skills clinics, right? And the more you can train people on what is going to benefit you. And when you can get an employee's training and objectives to align with the company objectives, like
Rock
that's
and
the
roll.
winning formula,
Yeah.
right? So if you have an employee that says, hey, you know what? I really want to be a crew leader. It's just something I really want to do. But then you're trying to grow by 20% next year and you're going to need 2 more crew leaders. It's like, what a winning formula, right? So this person wants to train over the year to be a crew leader. You need crew leaders. And now your objectives are aligning with their objectives. And that's the goal around this whole program is to get alignment on objectives.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, and I think, if there's a theme and everything that you're talking about, it's just a little bit of discipline. Like, this isn't a rocket science type of approach to things. You look at the top 5 fires that you're dealing with on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and then you build a skill workshop for an hour every Saturday to deal with the top 5 fires. Like, that does not take somebody, a massive amount of creativity to come up with this approach. That's why I think it's so beautiful, because it's simple. It just takes a little bit of discipline. Not to mention the fact that people that show up on Saturday for an hour are obviously engaged folks because they care about developing themselves on times they're not necessarily on the clock. So that's a really cool approach. So
I've
then,
heard of, oh, sorry, I just want to
oh yeah,
quickly
shoot,
add to
shoot,
that.
shoot.
I've heard of one contractor that does run these skills clinics and they open it up to other landscapers in the area. So they say, hey, we're having a skills clinic on a cut saw or a stone saw on Saturday. Uh, they charge them a nominal fee. It just helps cover breakfast and coffee. But then they kind of create this community and they get all these landscapers coming together and learning skills together. So they kind of provide the service, but then also they're exposing their culture and their company to other people out there. And down the road, if those other people ever want a new job, it might be the first call they make as well, because they already know what the culture is like at that company. So
Not to
it's just
mention
one
that it,
strategy I've heard of.
yeah, that's cool. I mean, of all the industries, I think green's one of the most cooperative. Like businesses are really open to share when we're at conferences, as part of associations, and it's also a cool way to make it so that you don't just have one person showing up for a skill session, right? You can have a workshop. You can have it so there's 6, 7 people coming from 2 or 3 companies. So then, as a person that's been in the space, you've seen people fail at this and succeed at this when it comes to skill development, training, building an organizational culture around developing humans and career paths. Is there anybody that stands out to you as like these people really got it right? Like, is there a story you can kind of help people see of like maybe they started off a bit smaller, but then they started to put these pieces into place and they grew over time, just so people can get an idea of like the impact of starting this type of discipline?
Yeah, for sure. The key is to like make a process and stick to it. So there's so many contractors I talk to, and I help them roll out Greenius. And my first phone call, it's like, okay, what's your onboarding process now? And they're like, we don't have one. And it's not like a small company problem. Like I've been to large companies with like 500 plus employees that don't have an onboarding program. So there's so many softwares involved. So the first question is like, okay, you finish the job interview, you're hiring the person. What's next? How do you enter them into your system? When do they get entered in? Who enters them in? And set up some owners in the process. So, okay, now we've entered them into our systems, into our HR tool. Who's going to add them into Greenius? Okay, we got them added into Greenius. We send out their training ID. The employee does it. Who's going to do those field checklists? Are we going to have checklists on Fridays? What's our checklist day of the week? And then are we going to have weekly tailgates? And clearly define your process and set owners to it. And that's the only way it's going to succeed. If you kind of just hope it works out, it's just not going to it's just not going to work out. You need to define your process and set clear owners of each of those processes that are accountable to it. And that's the only way I've ever seen it successfully roll out.
Yeah, that's cool. And I think also, sometimes, not necessarily the most natural state for an entrepreneur to talk about process. For some folks, they're a bit more like fly by the seat of the pants. They're really skilled and knowledgeable in their craft. They're good at sales. They're good with people. They've inspired some folks to come join them. And then the idea of developing a process can be like, oh, I don't like process. But I think what you've articulated too is, and what we've seen in not only ourselves, but in a lot of our clients, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to
No.
be, here's the 4 steps. And then as you develop the 4 steps and run them, you're like, we're missing 2 steps. It's like, okay, cool. Now we can add them. But if the first 4 steps are never there, there's nothing to ever work off of. I think that's a big piece for people to just know that you don't have to get the process perfect out of the gate.
Yeah, for sure. And what the most common process is, so I don't want people to feel alone here, is like I talk to a lot of contractors, and the first thing that most of them do is just on the job training. So we hire somebody on Friday, we put them on a crew on Monday, and that's it. There's no
Shadow.
follow up. Yeah. And that's not a good process, because now you're going to be putting out the same fires today that you're going to be putting out next month, and you're just hoping they're learning through osmosis, that they're becoming these great employees, but you have no way to measure it. You have no way to identify their strengths, their weaknesses. And I went through this myself, to be truthfully honest. I wanted to learn the landscape industry a lot better before I started building Greenius. So this is going back like many, many, many years ago. But I said, okay, I want to work on a maintenance crew. I want to see what it's all about. I want to work on a construction crew. And I show up for my first day on the construction crew. And at the time, the crew didn't know who I was. To them, I was just a
Right.
new employee.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Hey,
yeah,
Matt,
so
welcome. Here's your
yeah,
coffee.
exactly. And they said, hey, Matt, hop in that tractor and move that pile of gravel from the front yard to the backyard. We need to work on this. They were building a retaining wall at the time. And I said, I've never driven a tractor. What do I do? And they're like, oh, just sit in it, turn it on. This is your gas. And I was like, okay. Within 20 minutes of showing up, I was in a tractor moving gravel. But then within about 30 minutes, I was getting crap because I wasn't doing it properly and the bucket of gravel wasn't full enough. Right. So, but that was the training I got. So I was annoying the crew leader. I was annoying all the new experienced workers because
You
they're
don't
waiting
feel
on
good
this
about it
gravel.
either.
No, I felt terrible. And I mean, with a proper program, I would have been shown how to use a tractor before I was on the job site. I would have known my expectations, and then I would have been more qualified. And then if I went through this proper onboarding, I would have shown up knowing what to do, not to mention the risks. Like I was going within 2 to 3 feet of the house, and I could have easily hit the house. I didn't, but it could have easily happened. And all of that got skipped, and I was just show up, get in the tractor, and go. Whereas so much could have gone wrong, and that's where a solid onboarding program would prevent that. And then there's less fires, and then I'm not annoying the crew leaders. The job's getting done faster. My billable hours are better. So this onboarding program just pays dividends.
Yeah, well, then the crew leader isn't annoyed. They're having more fun at work. They want to stay. They're doing more, like they're more productive as a group, and the list goes on and on and on. So, if I am just like, okay, cool, I need to use Greenius, what do I do? Like, how do I start looking into this platform and reaching out to you guys and figuring out whether I should use it or not?
Yeah. So first of all, just go to our website, gogreenius.com. From there, you can sign up for a live we call it live proof of concept, live demo. It's usually hosted by me or Jeremy. And twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we host an hour session where we go through how to build an onboarding program, why you need to be doing training. From there, we then open the Greenius program and we actually build that onboarding program. And the key thing I like to point out is that live POC is only about 1 hour. And in that 1 hour, you learn how to build an onboarding program and build it in Greenius and execute it. So we're a little bit different than other softwares where your rollout's 2 or 3 months and you need kind of 5 people. Just one person can be a great user in an hour and you can be an expert in 2 hours. So I would start by going to our website, signing up for one of those live POCs. And we're also hosting, I know it's coming up really quick on February 20th, 21st, and 22nd. We're hosting a summit for all Greenius users and LMN users where you can come learn about how to improve your business, how to improve Greenius. Mark Bradley is going to be speaking a lot about revenue per hour. So, how landscape companies can really maximize their profits. So, it's just kind of these 3 days of intense workshops and lessons as well. It's a great opportunity to learn about both products. So,
And is this the first time you guys are holding it, or is this like an annual thing?
uh,
Or
it was an annual thing before COVID. Then we shut it down, and then it's our first one since COVID. So they're very well attended. Lots of contractors are there. It's a great community chance to talk with everybody and just really learn about the products, learn about processes, learn about how to create more revenue per hour. Like if you left there and didn't learn anything or change something within your business within a week, I'd be shocked.
right? Yeah, no, that's cool. And where do you sign up for that?
That is on the LMN website under the summit. So all the details are just go to golmn.com and then the landscape summit links there. And you can sign up and get all the information there.
Sweet. And if you can't sign up this year, make it whatever, because this will be posted probably in a week or two. So it'll be maybe 2 weeks before the actual show or the workshop, then maybe put in your calendar your market for next year.
Yeah, it is. It is live. It is. You can go to the website and see everything at golmn.com and you can sign up now. It's just, I know people might not have the bandwidth to go because it's in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, but yeah.
Well, it'll probably be 2 weeks once this thing goes live. But that's okay. So then you mentioned a couple of books. The one you mentioned, Fire Your Hiring Habits. But before we let you go, Matt, what would be one of your most like influential authors, speakers that you'd want to be like, hey, you gotta check this person out?
So there's two for sure. Firing Your Hiring Habits by John Mitchell. And then the second book, you might even know this from the marketing world, but Building a Story Brand.
Oh yeah,
Like
Donald Miller.
that book changed my mindset because like you all got to have this great story for your customers to understand what your business is all about. But that also applies to your employees, right? They got to know your story brand, and they got to know what your brand's all about. And all your employees become your brand ambassadors. So when they're telling your story to their friends about what it's like to work there, you want to know what they're saying, and controlling that message. And if you don't define it, how do you know what they're saying, right? So those two books, like, I read both of those books and made changes like instantly. They're both, I found, pretty powerful.
Cool, man. I appreciate you sharing. So we got Fire Your Hiring Habits, John Mitchell, and Story Brand by Donald Miller,
Yeah.
which are amazing. I haven't read Fire Your Hiring Habits, so I got to check that out for sure. Well, Matt, really appreciate you doing this, man. Thanks for coming on the show, and everybody else for listening to this. So we'll see you in the next
Awesome.
episode.
Thank you.
The I Am Landscape Growth Podcast is brought to you by Intrigue, where passionate marketing meets predictable results for entrepreneurs. Remember to like and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss the next episode. And if you would like to be a guest on the podcast, please visit intriguemedia.com and click on podcasts.